The rain came down in relentless sheets that autumn evening, turning the sidewalks into glistening rivers. Carl held the umbrella over his wife, Anna, as they hurried back to their car, their 5-year-old daughter Lily giggling in her rain boots, splashing in puddles with carefree delight. That's when Anna froze mid-step. "Carl, wait, look," she said, her voice laced with urgency. There, huddled under a bench, was a tiny, soaked ball of fur. Its faint mewling barely carried over the rain's pounding rhythm. "It's just a kitten," Carl said, but his words faltered as Anna knelt down. The kitten looked up at her with wide, terrified eyes, its frail body trembling. "She's freezing," Anna said softly, wrapping the kitten in her scarf. "We can't just leave her here." Carl sighed, looking at Lily, whose eyes were shining with hope. "Okay, let's take her home," he said. And so, the tiny stray cat became part of their family. Lily named her Pepper after her smoky fur, and they nursed her back to health with warm milk, blankets, and endless affection. Over time, Pepper grew stronger and healthier, her once frightened demeanor giving way to playful curiosity and a fierce loyalty to the family that had rescued her. The first time Pepper saved them was during the earthquake. It started with a sound no one heard but her, the kind of deep, guttural vibration that hummed through the floorboards like a silent alarm. Pepper, the scrappy tabby with a coat as wild as her instincts, sat bolt upright on the edge of 5-year-old Lily's bed. Her tail lashed once, twice, like the ticking hand of a clock counting down to something unseen. Lily stirred, her tiny hand reaching out to touch the warm fur. "Pepper," she murmured in her half-sleep, unaware of the storm brewing beneath her feet. The house stood quiet, the night blanketed in a stillness that felt heavier than usual, but Pepper wasn't fooled. She leapt down, landing silently on the wooden floor, her paws a whisper against the grain. Her ears twitched, her whiskers quivering as she padded toward the master bedroom. The cat let out a low, insistent meow, a sound not of hunger or boredom, but urgency. Carl groaned, rolling over to face his wife, Anna. "What's with her?" he muttered, his voice groggy with sleep. "She's probably hungry," Anna replied, pulling the blanket higher. "Go back to sleep." But Pepper wasn't letting it go. She clawed at the door, her cries growing louder, sharper. It wasn't the sound of an animal making demands. It was a warning, a plea. Then it came. A jolt so sudden it felt as though the earth itself had been torn open. The bed shook violently, the walls groaning as if they were alive. Carl and Anna shot up, panic slicing through the haze of sleep. "Lily!" Anna screamed, scrambling out of bed as the room seemed to tilt and twist around her. Pepper darted back toward Lily's room, her sleek form disappearing down the hallway just as a deafening crack split the air. A picture frame crashed to the floor, glass scattering like jagged stars. Carl stumbled after Anna, the ground beneath him rolling like waves in a storm. When they reached Lily's door, it was ajar, swinging on its hinges. Inside, the little girl stood frozen, clutching Pepper to her chest. The cat's fur was bristled, her green eyes wide and fierce, as if she alone could fight the chaos around them. "Come on," Carl shouted, grabbing Lily just as a piece of plaster fell from the ceiling. They raced down the hallway, Pepper darting ahead, leading them toward the front door. The family spilled out onto the lawn, their breaths coming in gasps as the house behind them groaned and shifted. Neighbors gathered in the street, their faces pale in the dim light of the street lamps. Anna clutched Lily tightly, her heart pounding in her chest. "We could have," she began, but her voice broke under the weight of what might have been. Pepper sat a few feet away, her tail curling around her paws. She licked her fur calmly, as if the night hadn't just tried to swallow them whole. Carl crouched beside her, running a hand over her head. "You knew," he said softly, his voice trembling. "You knew before we did." Pepper glanced up at him, her green eyes steady, unblinking. There was no pride in her gaze, only the quiet assurance of an animal who had done what she must. The next time the cat saved the family from a fire. The smell of smoke was faint at first, almost imperceptible against the scent of Anna's lavender-scented candles. The house had settled into its usual rhythm after the earthquake, a strange calm, as if the chaos of the night before had never happened. But Pepper was restless. She sat perched on the windowsill in the living room, her sharp eyes scanning the dark expanse outside. Carl had joked earlier that Pepper was on earthquake patrol, her vigilance both comforting and unnerving. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, building a castle out of brightly colored blocks. "Look, Pepper," she called out, holding up a small plastic tower. The cat flicked her tail but didn't move, her attention fixed on something unseen. It was Anna who noticed the faint haze first. She had been folding laundry in the bedroom when the smell hit her, a bitter, acrid tang that made her nose wrinkle. "Carl?" she called out, her voice laced with unease. Carl, who had been dozing on the couch, sat up groggily. "What's up?" "Do you smell that?" Anna stepped into the hallway, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the ceiling. A thin wisp of smoke curled along the edge of the vent, faint but unmistakable. Carl's face darkened as he followed her gaze. "I'll check it out," he said, his voice steady but tense. As Carl headed toward the basement, Pepper jumped down from the windowsill. Her movements were quick, almost frantic, as she darted toward the kitchen, meowing loudly. "Not now, Pepper," Anna muttered, her mind racing. She moved to grab her phone, ready to call for help if Carl's investigation confirmed her worst fears. But Pepper wouldn't be ignored. She ran to Anna, pawing at her leg before bolting back toward Lily in the living room. Her cries grew sharper, more insistent, echoing off the walls. "Mommy, why is Pepper yelling?" Lily asked, clutching her favorite stuffed bunny. Anna's heart clenched. She followed the cat's gaze to the ceiling above the kitchen. That's when she saw it, the faint glow of light seeping through the cracks, a sinister orange that pulsed like a living thing. "Carl!" she screamed, panic ripping through her. He emerged from the basement, coughing and waving away smoke. "It's coming from upstairs," he shouted. "We need to get out, now!" Anna grabbed Lily, holding her close as Carl yanked open the front door. The thick, acrid smoke billowed out, filling the air with a suffocating heat. Pepper was already ahead of them, her small frame darting through the open door and onto the lawn. She turned back, yowling loudly, her voice cutting through the chaos like a beacon. "Come on," Carl urged, pulling Anna and Lily toward the exit. Just as they reached the door, a loud crack split the air, followed by a shower of sparks. The fire had breached the ceiling, flames licking hungrily at the wooden beams. Anna stumbled onto the grass, clutching Lily tightly. They collapsed in a heap, coughing and gasping for air. Pepper circled them, her green eyes wide with what could only be described as determination. She placed herself between the family and the burning house, her fur singed but her spirit unyielding. The neighbors were already outside, dialing emergency services and shouting offers of help. But for Carl, Anna, and Lily, their focus was on the small, fierce creature that had led them to safety. "She knew again," Anna whispered, her voice trembling. Carl nodded, his eyes glistening. "Twice now," he murmured, pulling Lily and Pepper into a protective embrace. "She's our guardian." The fire had left its scars, burnt walls, charred furniture, and a lingering unease that seemed to settle into every corner of their temporary rental home. Weeks had passed, but the family still spoke of Pepper's heroism in hushed, reverent tones. Even Lily, who used to treat Pepper like a plush toy, now watched the cat with a mixture of awe and curiosity. "Mommy," she'd asked one day, How does Pepper always know when something bad is going to happen? Anna had no answer, only a gentle smile as she stroked Pepper's fur. "She's special," she said simply, as though that explained everything. It was a quiet evening when the next ordeal unfolded. The family had decided to escape the stress of rebuilding their home with a weekend at a cozy cabin nestled in the woods. It was idyllic, the kind of place where the air smelled of pine and the only sounds were birdsong and the rustle of leaves. Lily was thrilled. She dashed barefoot across the grassy clearing, chasing after fireflies, while Carl tended to the grill and Anna unpacked a basket of sandwiches. Pepper, as usual, was never far from Lily's side. "Don't go too far," Anna called out, her voice light but cautious. "I won't," Lily giggled, twirling as the fireflies danced around her. Pepper, perched on a tree stump, watched intently. Her tail swished in slow, deliberate arcs, a metronome ticking away the seconds until something shifted. It was subtle at first, a faint rustling in the underbrush, easily mistaken for the wind. But Pepper's ears perked up, her entire body going rigid. She leapt down, landing softly in the grass, her gaze fixed on the shadowy edge of the clearing. Anna noticed the change immediately. "Carl," she said, her voice tinged with worry, "look at Pepper." Carl followed her gaze. "She's probably after a squirrel," he said, though the words felt hollow even as he said them. But Pepper didn't stalk like a hunter. She stood her ground, her fur bristling as a low, guttural growl escaped her throat. Lily, oblivious, bent to pluck a daisy from the grass. That's when Anna saw it. Just beyond her daughter's tiny hand, coiled and gleaming in the fading sunlight, was a snake. The air seemed to freeze. Anna opened her mouth to scream, but the sound caught in her throat. Carl bolted forward, but it was Pepper who moved first. The cat shot across the clearing like a streak of lightning, her body low and her movements precise. She reached Lily in a heartbeat, positioning herself between the child and the snake. Her growl deepened, a fierce, primal sound that sent chills down Anna's spine. The snake hissed, its body shifting slightly, but Pepper didn't flinch. She swiped at it with a single, calculated motion, her claws grazing its scales just enough to startle it. The snake recoiled, retreating into the underbrush with a final, defiant hiss. Carl scooped up Lily, holding her close as Anna ran to his side. Tears streamed down her face as she pulled Lily into her arms, checking her over for any sign of harm. "I'm okay, Mommy," Lily said softly, her wide eyes locked on Pepper. "She saved me." Pepper sat a few feet away, her fur on end and her breathing heavy. She licked her paw once, then twice, as if to reassure herself the danger had passed. Carl crouched beside the cat, his hand trembling as he stroked her head. "You've done it again, girl," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. Anna knelt beside him, her arms still wrapped around Lily. "She's not just a pet," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's family." The three of them sat there in the fading light, their hearts pounding and their gratitude immeasurable. And at the center of it all was Pepper, the stray cat who had found them and saved them, not once, not twice, but 3 times. As the first stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Anna reached out to scratch behind Pepper's ears. "Thank you," she said softly, her words carrying the weight of everything they couldn't fully express. Pepper purred, her green eyes glowing with quiet satisfaction. The family was safe, and that was all that mattered. The night had settled into a deep, still quiet, the kind where even the hum of the refrigerator seemed louder than usual. The new house, still unfamiliar and echoey from its fresh renovations, stood like a fortress in the suburban neighborhood. Carl, Anna, and little Lily were finally asleep after an exhausting day of unpacking boxes and trying to make the place feel like home. Pepper, as always, was on guard. She had claimed her favorite spot on the windowsill, her green eyes glinting faintly in the moonlight. The house was dark, save for a dim kitchen light Anna had left on, just in case Lily woke up thirsty in the middle of the night. It started with a sound, a faint scrape, barely audible, like fingernails brushing against glass. Pepper's ears swiveled sharply toward the patio door. Her fur prickled along her spine as she leapt silently to the floor, her movements fluid and deliberate. From her vantage point in the living room, she could see the source of the disturbance. Two shadowy figures hovered outside the sliding door, their silhouettes distorted by the security floodlight they had strategically disabled. One was fiddling with the lock, while the other kept a watchful eye on the street. Pepper crouched low, her tail flicking once before going still. Her instincts screamed danger, but she didn't panic. Instead, she crept toward the hall, her padded feet making no sound against the hardwood floor. She stopped at Lily's room, nudging the door open just enough to check on the little girl. Lily was curled up under her blanket, clutching her stuffed bunny, blissfully unaware of the threat outside. Satisfied that Lily was safe for now, Pepper moved toward the kitchen, her sharp gaze scanning for something, anything that could help. The burglars were inside now. The lock had given way with a soft click, and the first figure stepped cautiously into the darkened house. Pepper's eyes narrowed as she darted toward the counter. She leapt effortlessly onto the kitchen island, her movements as silent as a shadow. There, on the edge of the counter, sat a glass vase, a housewarming gift from the neighbors. It was sturdy, heavy, and perched precariously close to the edge. As the first burglar moved deeper into the living room, Pepper positioned herself behind the vase. She gave it a calculated push with her paw. Crash! The vase shattered into a million pieces on the tile floor, the sound erupting like a bomb in the silent house. The burglars froze, their heads snapping toward the kitchen. "What was that?" one of them hissed, his voice low but panicked. "An animal, maybe. They didn't mention a dog," the other muttered, already retreating a step. But Pepper wasn't done. She hissed loudly, a feral, unearthly sound that echoed through the house. The burglars exchanged nervous glances, their bravado wavering. Before they could decide on their next move, the security alarm blared to life. The sudden, piercing wail jolted the house awake. Lights flickered on as Carl and Anna stumbled out of their bedroom, their faces pale with confusion and fear. "What's going on?" Carl yelled over the deafening noise. Pepper darted toward him, her tail high and her movements urgent. She meowed loudly, running toward the living room and then back to him, as if trying to lead him to the source of the threat. Carl's gaze followed her, and that's when he saw them, the two men bolting out the back door, their figures illuminated briefly by the neighbors' motion-activated lights as they fled into the night. "Call the police!" Carl shouted to Anna, his adrenaline surging as he grabbed the nearest object, a heavy flashlight, for protection. But the burglars were gone, their plan thwarted before it had even begun. The police arrived quickly, taking statements and examining the shattered vase and the damaged lock. "You're lucky," one officer said, shaking his head. "If they'd gotten further in, who knows what could have happened?" Carl looked down at Pepper, who sat regally in the middle of the kitchen, licking her paw as if nothing unusual had happened. "It wasn't luck," he said, crouching down to stroke her fur. "It was her." Anna scooped Pepper into her arms, pressing her face into the cat's soft fur. "You're incredible," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Lily, woken by the commotion, appeared in the doorway, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "What happened?" "Pepper saved us again," Anna said with a smile, holding the cat up for Lily to see. Lily's face lit up. "She's a superhero." Pepper purred contentedly. her green eyes glinting with satisfaction. For the family, there was no doubt. She wasn't just a pet. She was their protector, their guardian, their hero. And as the night settled back into an uneasy calm, Pepper resumed her post on the windowsill, her watchful eyes scanning the darkness for the next threat. Thank you for listening to our story. If you want more, leave your wishes in the comments. Tell us, have cats ever saved you from trouble? If you liked it, like it and subscribe to the channel. There are many interesting stories ahead.